Let's talk about Primaris Space Marines, shall we? I've recently been re-listening to the Space Marine Conquests books that came out a little while ago to introduce the lore aspect of the Primaris, and the factional differences and little rivalries that broke out between the Firstborn and their replacements made me want to dig a little bit deeper into what exactly the difference is. Before we get into the video, I do just want to take a quick moment to thank my channel members. Vort, Cersei, Victory Kaiser, Kraydog, Jewish Dictionary, Tootsie Cat Meow, Nicholas and Imondo for supporting me, as well as ask you, if you haven't already, to like, subscribe and maybe leave a comment. It really does help smaller channels like mine more than you probably expect. Anyway, on with the video. I suppose we should probably start with what exactly the terms Firstborn and Primaris actually mean, for anyone who doesn't already know. Firstborn Astartes are basically the first generation of Space Marine, these stocky little guys. Before 2017, every Space Marine model was Firstborn, and they were just called Space Marines. By the time the 8th edition of 40k rolled around though, GW wanted to refresh the Space Marine model range, making them a bit bigger and a bit more realistically proportioned. In technical terms, the more proportional models are known as true scale, whereas the Firstborn models, with their bigger heads, hands and weapons, are known as heroic scale. These new models were called Primaris Marines, and to differentiate the older heroic scale models, the term Firstborn was created and used to refer to them. However, GW didn't want to just change up the models and say that Space Marines were always this size, just not proportioned right on the tabletop, and so they had to come up with a lore explanation for the new, bigger boys. How much this lore explanation annoys you is personal preference. I personally don't mind it, but a lot of people really hated it. Basically, what they ended up with is saying that Guilliman, after the second founding, split the legions, but before he was stunted on by Fulgrim, tasked everyone's favourite tech heretic, Belisarius Cawl, with improving the standard Space Marine creation process, as he felt that humanity could probably do with better weapons to combat the forces of chaos. This is widely regarded as a pretty decent idea. To do this, he gave Cawl a big box containing the pure gene seed of all 20 Primarchs. This is what we in the business call a colossal fuck-up, as though Cawl pinky promised not to use the traitor gene seed to make any Primaris, he's also supposed to hate AI, and yet still made the Cawl inferiors, so he's not exactly trustworthy. Anyway, Cawl recruited a bunch of kids from around the Sol system, definitely only implanted them with loyalist gene seed organs, and spent the next 10,000 years, give or take, indoctrinating and training them, ready to unleash them upon the galaxy whenever Guilliman popped back in to run the Imperium and gave him the all clear. In addition to the extra organs and enhancements that he gave his new creations, which we will get onto in a minute, he also gave them new and improved versions of the Firstborn's armour and weapons. Basically just the same stuff but upscaled to fit the new Marine's chunkier frame, and slightly improved with the archaeotech that he had procured. I'm not going to be covering this war gear in much detail in this video. I made a different video a while ago going through every single Space Marine armour mark, and I will probably make another video in future going through every Space Marine weapon, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, so now we're all on the same page about what I'm nattering on about, let's get into the actual differences between the two types of Space Marine. Starting out with the most obvious. The Primaris Marines are big boys, standing a head taller than a Firstborn, which would put them at somewhere between 8 and 9 feet tall, although the height of Space Marines is surprisingly less consistent than you'd expect. According to the wiki, some Primaris Marines can be nearly 10 feet tall. This extra height is due to the Magnificat, one of the 3 extra gene seed organs that Cawl stuffed inside his Astartes 2.0. that acts as a general +1 to all of the normal Firstborn gene seed organs. As a result, the Biscopia and Osmodula, which are responsible for the added muscle growth and bone growth respectively of Space Marines, just do, well, more of that, leading to bigger and bulkier boys. The Magnificat is actually the right half of the Immortis gland that EMPs implanted within each of the Primarchs, which raises some interesting questions. Call was only able to find records and blueprints for the right half, as the left had been expunged from Imperial records. But what happens if he gets his hand on it? Do we get Primarch-sized Space Marines? I saw some speculation on Reddit that the left half was something warp-related, which was why it was expunged. Or maybe it just never existed and was actually cover for the warp sorcery that EMPs used to make the Primarchs. But anyway, I'm getting distracted. The other extra organs that have been jammed into the Primaris are the sinew coils and Belisarian furnace. The sinew coils are exactly what they sound like. Metallic cables reinforcing the marine sinews, making them both more durable and more strong. The Belisarian furnace, on the other hand, is a bit more interesting, partly because it doesn't actually do anything 99% of the time. In times of extreme stress, or when a warrior takes an otherwise fatal wound, the Belisarian furnace releases an immense amount of chemicals into his body, that both act as hyper-effective combat stims and aid in the rapid regrowth of tissue, bone and muscle. In War of Secrets, there are actually a couple of examples of the Dark Angels Primaris using their furnace to resist the mind control shenanigans that the chapter were using on their first Primaris reinforcements. They have since stopped doing that, or at least they have since stopped being caught doing that. I don't trust them. So that was the most obvious surface level physical differences between the two types of Marine. But there is a bit more going on under the hood, so to speak. Or at least there was with the first batch that Big Daddy Cole produced. As the Primaris project, that sounds really cringy even for 40k, but I don't know what else to call it, was initiated on Mars very shortly after the second founding in M31, the very first Primaris aspirants were taken from populations who would have had first-hand experience of the Great Crusade era of humanity, when things were going way better than they are nowadays. Because of this, many among the first wave were a bit jaded when they awoke from cryostasis to find the Imperium in a marked state of decay compared to when they went under. As the best character from War of Secrets put it, there is a certain irony to the fact that we were made to save the Imperium, but even a glance to the skies betrays the fact we awoke too late. We have not been welcomed as brothers, nor as much needed reinforcements, but tolerated as inconvenient reminders of an era long in the past. The 10,000 years of cryosleep on Mars, interrupted by the odd training session here and there and some good old hypnotic psycho-indoctrination, came with some other complications too. Many of the first Primaris Marines popped out into the Imperium with some very Martian-esque thought processes, being more technologically inclined than most Firstborn, referring to EMPs as the Omnisire, much to the annoyance of their chaplains, as I'm sure you could have guessed, and also a few of them really struggled to stop calling chapters legions, which is an absolutely adorable and wonderful detail. Of course, those differences only really applied to the first set of Primaris, those who served among the unnumbered sons before being shipped off to their parent chapter. The differences between the two types of Astartes in the current day of the setting is more or less purely physical, and the fact that a Firstborn can cross the Rubicon and become a Primaris Marine just exacerbates that. Although I wouldn't put it past a few chapters to still be very Firstborn biased, especially among their officer corps, Primaris exist as pretty much just bigger Firstborn nowadays. And that is absolutely fine by me. The older models are tiny in comparison, the scale of Primaris Marines is just so much better. They could do with some more banners though. So that was my little dive into the differences between Primaris and Firstborn Space Marines. This video was probably a fair bit shorter than normal, but honestly I just wanted to look into the differences between them for my own selfish enjoyment. And I needed an excuse to listen to the Conquest books again without feeling unproductive. They aren't exactly the greatest pieces of literature to come out of the Black Library, but they were my first 40k books, so they hold a special place in my heart. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much, it really does mean a lot. Like, subscribe, all the rest. A huge thank you again to my wonderful channel members. Their exclusive video this month is delayed, but it will be out within the week. And I will see you all in the next video.